Hi, my name is Anthony Martin. I'm the founder and CEO of Choice Mutual. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the 5 most common ways you're going to see agents and companies try to scam you as you're looking to buy burial insurance. Now, let me just start by saying most companies and agents in the final expense insurance business, they are not looking to scam you. They are honest, straight shooting folks. Sadly, every industry, insurance included, has its fair share of bad apples. So over the years, we've seen certain scams employed, and so I want to share those with you, that way you can protect yourself. And then afterwards, I'm going to share with you some very practical tips, that way you can ensure none of these ever happen to you. Okay, let's talk about scam number 1. And this is the one that I like to call the accidental death scam. And this actually comes in 2 forms, so I'm going to explain both of them. So first of all, for context, accidental death insurance is a type of life insurance that would pay out if and only if you were to die from an accident. So if you pass away for natural causes like a heart attack, cancer, or just pass away in your sleep, it would not pay out. You would have to die from something like a car crash, plane crash, or have lightning strike you in order for it to trigger a payout. Now, you've probably seen this before because they offer an insane amount of coverage for a super low price. For example, it's not uncommon to see offers for like $100,000 of coverage for $20 a month. The reason you get so much coverage for such a small price is because it only pays out for an accident. So a really common scam we've seen out there is an agent or a company, they'll offer a client a policy that's accidental death insurance, but not make it very clear that it only covers you for accidents. So the customer walks away from that transaction thinking that they're insured for natural or accidental causes, and they got an insane price, but in reality, they're not covered because, again, it's only for accidents. And the rate of accidental death is exceptionally low, especially if you're 50 and older. The chances of you dying from an accident are pretty close to 0. Okay, so that's the first way we'll see the accidental death scam employed. The second way, and this is probably more common, is when an agent will use accidental death insurance to inflate the total amount of coverage they're offering. Now, this is typically done by agents who are representing companies that are much more expensive than most others out there. So let me give you an example of what I mean. Let's just say this company that they represent is offering $10,000 of coverage for $80 a month. Now, let's just say also, for example, most other companies would charge maybe $60 a month. That's a pretty big gap for most folks. And so one of the ways that they'll try to get people to buy their coverage is by bundling a $10,000 natural death policy along with a $10,000 accidental death rider. And they'll present it to the client as, hey, Mrs. Jones, you're covered for a total of $20,000, and it's only going to cost you $80 a month. So the customer walks away from that transaction thinking they have $20,000 of life insurance, which is true to a certain degree, but only half of it covers them for accidental death, and the other half covers them for natural causes. So they just think they're getting an insane deal, but the reality, they just don't know that only half of it covers them for natural causes. It's really unfortunate, but it's another way we'll see agents deceive folks with this accidental death insurance. Okay, let's talk about scam number 2. What I like to call the waiting period scam. What does this mean? Okay, so with final expense insurance, some policies have a 2-year waiting period where if you die during this time for any non-accidental reason, the insurance company will simply refund your money that you've paid plus a small amount of interest. Now, some plans don't have a waiting period, but honestly in this business, a lot of plans do have this 2-year waiting period provision. So a common scam we're going to see out there is agents or companies, they will sell somebody a plan that has a waiting period and fail to disclose it. That's completely unacceptable. So here's the thing. Some customers are going to have a waiting period. For example, if you're on dialysis, it doesn't matter what you do, the only plan you could ever acquire will have a waiting period. But as an agent, when we sell a policy, it would never be acceptable to not inform somebody that they have a waiting period. And all too often, we see people that have purchased a policy and they were simply just not told about the waiting period provision. That's completely unacceptable. Okay, let's talk about scam number 3. And this is what I like to call the rate classification change scam. Okay, so what does this mean? Okay, so with final expense insurance, there are a lot of companies that have plans with no waiting period, which is something you do have to qualify for. Typically, they'll offer 2 to 3 different health ratings for these plans. So think of it like a low, medium, and a high. They'll usually use words like preferred, graded, modified, standard, different terms to describe these different health ratings. Your health determines which one, if any, that you would qualify for. So let's say, for example, you're applying for $10,000 of coverage. The low one is $50 a month. The next one is $75, and the third one is $100 a month with a 2-year waiting period, okay? That's an example. That's usually how they work. So here's how this scam would go. The agent with the customer is expecting that the client will get approved at the $50 a month for $10,000 of coverage. Let's call it the preferred rating. They submit the application, and for whatever medical reason, the insurance company will not approve them for that plan. They'll in turn say to the agent, unfortunately, their client doesn't qualify preferred, but good news, we can offer them the modified plan for $100 a month. How would you like to proceed? And so they will rely on the agent to get in contact with the customer, relay this to them, and simply find out how would the customer like to proceed. Do they want to accept this offer, or do they want to simply withdraw the application? So here's where it gets really devious. The agents that do this, they will never talk to the client. They'll just say to the insurance company, client wants to accept it. Now, the insurance company is going to give the agent 2 options in this case. They're going to say, Mr. Agent, do you want to keep the premium per month the same and adjust the death benefit accordingly, or does your client want to keep the death benefit the same and accept the higher price? And so in order to mask their deception, they'll tell the insurance company, keep the price the same, but instead lower the death benefit according to the new rate classification. So let's just say, for example, at this rate classification here, the $50 a month only buys them $5,000 of coverage with a 2-year waiting period, mind you. So the reason why the customer is typically unaware that this ever happened is because when they look at their bank statement, they're going to still see the $50 a month coming out, and because they never looked at their policy, they didn't see that the death benefit was reduced to $5,000, and they never know about it. It's really unfortunate, but you'd be amazed. This happens all the time. Okay, let's talk about scam number 4. And this is the one that I like to call the health question / medication scam. Okay, so here's how this goes. So first of all, final expense insurance that has no waiting period is something you have to qualify for, meaning you must apply with a company where you answer health questions. Here's the thing you got to understand. You as the applicant are not going to be the one that's actually marking the answers on the application. Your agent is going to be the one doing that. So here's how this will play out. Let's just say you're applying for $10,000 of coverage for $75 a month. You're going through the application, the agent is asking you the questions, you're giving the answers, and then he says one that causes you to say yes. This is likely unexpected to them. So here's what happens. The agent, instead of marking yes, they are going to mark no. And the reason why is because if they mark yes, they know the insurance company is going to come back and say, we'll approve them, but the price is going to be double and have a waiting period. That's a really common response when you mark yes to an application. So because the agent knows that's a hard sell, going to the client and say, hey, I know we were trying to get you $10K for $75, but unfortunately that's not going to happen. Instead, they're willing to offer you the same $10,000 at $150 a month with a 2-year waiting period. They know that's a hard sell. A good majority of the clients are simply going to say no thanks, and the agent's going to walk out of there without a sale. So in the interest of them making their commission, they're going to mark no, and they're going to hopefully get you approved at this one here. Here's where this all falls apart for you. Every insurance company, there are no exceptions to this. It doesn't matter what type of insurance or who issues the policy. If you have immediate coverage and you die in the first 2 years of the policy, every company will order a copy of your medical records before they pay your claim. They will look to see, did you have any pre-existing conditions that were mentioned on the application prior to the time you applied. If they find evidence that you did and you did not disclose it on the application, they will not pay your claim. They will do what's called a rescission, which is simply their way of saying, had you shared this with us then, we would not have issued the policy. And all they would do is refund the money that you've paid. They will not pay your claim. Now understand, you didn't do anything wrong because you answered the question correctly. It's the agent who did it inaccurately. And the problem is, most people, when they sign their application, be it verbal or doing it through like a wet signature, they don't really look at the application to make sure that the answers were all marked appropriately. So they unfortunately just never noticed it. So this is a really common one with health questions, but there's also one similar with medications. Now, some final expense insurance companies want agents to write down a list of the medications that the client is taking. And for full context, if you apply with a company where there are health questions, they will also access different databases that tell them what medications that you've been prescribed, because that tells them a very good deal about your health. The thing is, those databases aren't perfect. Sometimes there's medications that people have been prescribed in the past that don't exist in that database. So some insurance companies, kind of as a backdrop, will have agents write down a list of any known medications on the application. So in a similar fashion, let's just say this agent comes across a medication that would have caused them to get approved at this rating, they'll simply leave it off the application. But therein again lies the problem. You die in the first 2 years, they get your records, and they're going to see Dr. Johnson prescribed you a medication that, had you put on the application, would have caused them to approve you for this with a waiting period, and thus they will not pay your claim. Okay, let's talk about scam number 5, the last one. And this is one I like to call the phrasing scam, okay? This is essentially where an agent or a company deliberately misuses words to confuse or mislead you. And so there's 2 different phrases they'll use to do this. So the first one would be the effective date version. Just so you understand for context, with insurance, the effective date of a policy is nothing more than the day the terms and conditions of the policy become activated. So for example, if you have a policy with a 2-year waiting period and you make your first payment on May 1st of 2022, May 1st is when they start that 2-year countdown. And so here's how this will play out in the real world. The agent will say, "Great news, Mrs. Jones, your policy is effective as of today." Mrs. Jones will in turn interpret that as, "Great, I'm covered today because it said my policy is effective." The policy being effective doesn't waive the 2-year waiting period. It just is the day that that provision, along with the other terms and conditions of the policy, become activated. So that's one way that we'll see that happen. Another way would be covered. Okay? So here in this scenario, an agent or a company will say, "Mrs. Jones, you are covered as of today." And even if you have a waiting period, that still is true to some degree. Because if you have a policy that has a 2-year waiting period, if you die in the first 2 years from an accident, it'll still pay out. So that is some type of coverage in some capacity. So the way this will play out is, the agent will say, "Mrs. Jones, great news, you're covered as of today," which still has a measure of truth to it, but she interprets that as, "I don't have a waiting period," when in reality she did. So as you can see here, these phrasing scams are going to be employed by agents and companies who are selling policies with a waiting period, and they're looking for creative ways to avoid telling that to the client, and also to confuse them so that when somebody else, an honest agent, for example, tries to explain to them that they don't have immediate coverage, they'll say, "No, I'm sorry, but my agent, Andy, he said I was covered," or he said my policy was effective right now, and they refuse to believe that they were taken. It's sad, but it happens all the time. Okay, now that I've gone through the 5 most common scams you're going to encounter when looking for final expense insurance, I want to give you some practical tips that you can employ to ensure that you never become a victim. So first of all, asking a lot of questions up front is going to work wonders at weeding out the scammers. Understand, they don't want to be caught on a recorded line deliberately lying to you. Usually they like to lie via omission. In other words, they just leave out certain information and not tell you about it. So if you ask questions like, does the premium ever increase? Will the policy expire at any age? Does it cover me only for accidental death? Is there a 2 to 3 year waiting period for natural causes of death? Asking these types of questions will weed out the scammers and tell you precisely how the policy is going to work. Now, as important as it is to ask questions up front, it pales in comparison to how important it is that you read your policy when you get it. Understand that everything prior to the policy is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the policy. What you see in it is exactly what will happen. So you have to validate the premium. Is there a death benefit that decreases over time? Is there a waiting period? You also need to check the health questions because every policy will include a copy of the application, and you want to verify that all those health questions were marked exactly as you responded. So it's super important that you open up the policy and ensure that everything is accurate. If not, then either somebody made a mistake or you were scammed, and you should call the insurance company immediately and inform them of it and then make any necessary changes. If you're looking for final expense insurance, I encourage you to give us a call. Obviously, we're trustworthy. We're not going to try to scam you in any way, shape, or form. We're an independent agency. We have over 15 different insurance companies we work with, and we will objectively compare all of them to find you the best deal possible. I really hope you enjoyed this video and it helps you ensure that you never get scammed. My name is Anthony Martin. Thanks so much. Hey, thanks so much for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do me a big favor, hit the like and subscribe button below. And if you have any questions about final expense insurance, leave it in the comments below. I promise you I will personally respond to each one. And hey, can I let you in on a secret? Just below the description of this video, I've included some links to some of the most popular articles on our website. If you click on one, you will find information that literally cannot be found anywhere else on the internet. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. This information doesn't exist elsewhere. Check it out now.